let's see what it would look like. Jimmy did.
First, I feel like the cap was backwards, so I took the picture.
Right, the picture was inverted, because you see FG on the capping there. What would that stand for? Thank you, exactly. But the picture seems to be inverted, so Jimmy re-inverted it to where FG looks like it should. And that's the colorized version. Is that not true? Okay, let's look at this image here and study it just a bit here. First, let's start at the top. It looks like he has a gray kepi on with what would be a blue band. There's the three colors in the military. You have blue for infantry, yellow for cavalry, and red for artillery. That would be your markings on your uniform. So it would be a blue band here. FG for Farmville Guard in hat brass. Let us come on in, folks. Have a seat. Yes. Ms. Bolt, thank you so much. Come on. Have a seat. Now, I don't know if you can see his face here, but to me, I see a man with a steely-eyed determination, okay? And that man right there, all right, let's keep going, let's keep going. The uniform, the coat seems to be of the Washington artillery pattern with 9-button brass buttons, probably a blue collar, blue cuffs, and his chevrons over here. This is when he became a sergeant. Blue chevrons. Pants are gray with a blue stripe down those. The musket, I can't quite tell if it's an Enfield or a Springfield, but I'm going to go with probably Springfield on this right now. Because there needs to be brass pieces up here. The nose cap will be brass, and the butt plate that you can't see will be brass as well. That's the easiest way to distinguish Enfields. I don't know about you guys, but this man, he enlisted as a private. And within 2 years, he has risen to a sergeant, which he is here. He became an orderly sergeant. He was promoted to lieutenant, and then he became elected captain of the Farmville Guard. Okay. When I see that face, I see a man that could be captain. He led the Farmville Guard at the charge in Gettysburg. Horribly wounded. About part of his face was shot off, lost part of his tongue, laid on the field for 3 days in that July heat. How he survived, don't understand, but he did, captured, exchanged. He was also a Freemason, and that's going to help with his being exchanged. He ends up being exchanged and retired because of the horrible wound. He really wasn't much for field service anymore. But after the war, he became a real wheel in our community. He owned one of the tobacco warehouses that was in town. He had a store of his own. He became a town councilman from 1890 to 92. He would die in 1893. And he is buried at Cumberland Church. And I say that simply because in the ads from the time period about his death, there was an ad for the Farmville Guard to muster and go to Cumberland Church to pay respects to their last commander. And so he's buried there in an unmarked grave. I do not understand why that is, but so be it. But we know where he is buried, and that is at Cumberland Church. So, very excited to come across this, folks. And I'm glad that we could see it tonight, and Jimmy has made it so it can come to life more with the colorization. I think it's a daguerreotype. Ehrenberg, I believe, he did it here in Florida. But anyway, I don't want to take any more of your time. That. Wow. That gets me. Thank you very much. Set my piece and hand it through.
Okay, we're going to get the show going here in a second, since it pops up on the screen here. Tonight we have we have a PowerPoint presentation, which we'll get to in a second, but we're all here tonight to talk about the Dunnington Plantation. And we have a special guest here tonight, Liz Dunn and her husband Steve, right over here on the couch, Nelson Bolt and his wife Marsha, who were owners of the Dunnington property from 1960 to about 2000. Am I right, Nelson? Okay. And so if we have any questions as we go along, we got the experts here. Also with us tonight is Heather Beach. Heather is new to the Historical Society here, but I think you'll probably be seeing a lot of her. Give you a little background on Heather. She came about 2 years ago and met with Bob Flippin and myself and wanted the history of the Dunnington Mansion. She had found on the internet one of these sites like abandoned homes and had gotten interested. She drove from her home in Harrisonburg or Newmarket up in the valley in Virginia all the way down here to see the place and fell in love with it. For the last 2 years, basically from her home base in Newmarket, she has been working on a project to hopefully get the property sold, but also to save the mansion. She has a website up called DunningtonMansion.org. She's held many events at the Poplar Hill Farm. We've had documentaries made. The most recent one, I was there, Bob was there. A man from Oklahoma City came to film a documentary. A few months before that, Nelson and Marsha and I and Bob were over at Longwood and we did a documentary. All these documentaries will be coming around soon, and we may have one here next month, right, Heather? We're hoping. Yes. And tonight's, I'll say this too, we have some articles that after the meeting we want to display maybe over here on the table. We have a nurse's uniform, the nurse's bag that Liz gave to the Dunnington Foundation, and Heather brought it tonight. Liz has brought some family photo albums which she will allow people to look at the pictures. After the presentation here tonight, I'm going to show some pictures that Liz allowed me to scan out of the family album about a month ago. And I'm going to surprise her tonight and show her those black and white photos in color. I colorized them. I've been practicing, like Bob said, to take old photographs and restore them, repair them, turn them into color. And so I'll show you some examples tonight on Liz's photos. Heather, is anything you'd like to say before we start? Or after maybe?
Maybe after.
Okay. Okay.
It's a good book.
Tonight's presentation is basically a presentation that Virginia Dower Dickoff wrote while she was employed at Hampton-Sydney College in 1959. She wrote this 8-page typed out story which was given to the Buffalo Home Demonstration Club in Farmville, I guess. And we have taken that text and added pictures to it and made a PowerPoint out of it. And Heather is going to read paragraph by paragraph, and we'll show you a photograph that pretty much corresponds to that. And Liz's mother was Virginia Dower Dickoff. That will be explained in the slide. So let's, are you ready, Abby? Okay. Yeah, all right. That's right there, fine. or you can stay seated if you want to. And then people can see better behind you.
See my eyes will see
Well, it's going to be bigger. This is the actual copy that I was given. It's 8 pages stapled together there, and I forwarded it on to Heather. But we copied it and broke it down. Here's the first slide. You can read it out there for us.
Sure. Ooh, we're gonna get reversed. Virginia Dickoff grew up at Poplar Hill, where her parents worked and lived. She wrote this presentation about her days at Poplar Hill in March 1959. Do you want me to walk up front? Do you want me to get further away from
Billy's the sound man. We'll get
them?
lined
Maybe I'll
up
listen
here.
to that.
Go ahead.
Is that better?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, in March 1959.
Go ahead and start it over.
Virginia Dickoff grew up at Poplar Hill, where her parents worked and lived. She wrote this presentation about her days at Poplar Hill in March 1959.
That, of course, is a picture of Poplar Hill, a picture of Virginia on the left there. That is a picture of Mrs. India Dunnington on the right and her sister Betty on the left. And as you can see, we colorized them. Go ahead. You can go ahead and read that whole thing. You can read it.
The Buffalo Home Demonstration Club met with Mrs. E.J. Ward on July 9th. The meeting opened with the members repeating the Homemaker's Creed. The club was sorry to hear of Miss Cable's leaving to take a job in Blacksburg. The Federation of Gold Chairman brought some information on traffic accidents this year. A paper written by Miss Virginia Dallard Dickoff on the life of Mrs. Indianite Dunnington was read by one of the members. Mrs. Carl Vaughn and Mrs. Newton Goyne presented a very interesting demonstration on picnic time. Mrs. Indianite Dunnington of Poplar Hill. It probably makes us all feel good to have known or known about a person who has reached the age of 100. Mrs. Indianite Dunnington is now 101 and a half years old. Those of you who know her can reminisce with me.
I will interject. Ms. Indianite Dunnington lived to be about 103 years old. So this was written about a year and a half before she died.
For you who have recently joined us here at Hampton Sydney, I hope my talk tonight will introduce you to a most remarkable person who lives right here in our Prince Edward County, just 4 miles from Hampton City, on the 1,100-acre estate known as Poplar Hill.
That's India.
Mrs. Dunnington's interest in Hampton Sydney is great because many members of her family have been closely connected with this college. Although her husband, Walter Gray Dunnington Sr., was never a student at Hampton Sydney, he was for many years a member of the Board of Trustees. Her 3 sons, Dr. John H. Dunnington, Walter G. Dunnington Jr., and J. W. Dunnington, were educated at Hampton Sydney. William Dunnington followed in his father's footsteps and served also on the Board of Trustees. In addition, Mrs. Dunnington's father, Captain John H. Knight, Jr. of the Confederate Army, was a member of the Hampton Sydney class of 1848. Her brother, General John T. Knight, a West Point graduate, was a member of the class of 1880. 2 other brothers, William B. Knight and Carter Copeland Knight, were of the class of 1890 and 1893, respectively. Mrs. Dunnington came to Poplar Hill at the age of 4 when her father, John Hughes Knight, Jr., became the 5th owner of this estate. Mrs. Dunnington had 5 brothers and 3 sisters. Their early schooling was received from tutors right at Poplar Hill. Some of her brothers walked to Worsham and later to Hampton Sydney College, carrying their lunch and returning home at night. Governesses taught Mrs. Dunnington, and she also went 2 years to the female college in Farmville, down Longwood. In 1892, Mr. Walter Gray Dunnington, who married India Knight, bought Poplar Hill from Mr. Knight. He remodeled the home and built on the front section in 1897. Mr. Dunnington was a tobacconist and became known nationally in the tobacco world. For many years, he had orders from Austria, Italy. In fact, his business extended all over Europe as well as in the U.S. Actually, Norway was one of the most common places that he traded with. The cabin, we were told, that was built on the property, the log cabin, actually was shipped in from Norway. He had a good friend there. He actually named his last child, who died at 4 months of age after his best friend in Norway.
These little cement things, I guess you would say, right over the doorway, there's a blown up picture of them. And when we were out there doing several tours, people were asking about these, and we figured out that that's Walter Gray Dunnington, his initials. And over here on this side, he put 1897, which is when he built the addition on the front of the house. Of course, when we first started going there, it was all overgrown with weeds and ivy, I guess, but it's been cleared away now.
The three boys went to Hampton City College and lived on campus. Watt and Jack graduated from Hampton City College in 1911, but William went on to a business college. In his later years, Mr. Dunnington developed cancer and went to Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore for treatment. When he went home, he engaged 2 Johns Hopkins nurses to go with him and take care of him. One of these nurses was my mother, Dora Future. When Mr. Dunnington died in August 1922 at the age of 74, Dora went back to Canada to take care of her ill father. Sometime later, Mother was asked to come back to Farmville to take care of Lucy Dunnington Shield's baby son, Watt. She had then returned to Canada and married Francis J. Dowler.
So this is Liz's mother, right, Liz? Grandmother, okay. And Liz had told me that she made several trips back and forth from Canada to Farmville. And at the time, I guess the Dunningtons were trying to convince her to come and stay permanently. Is that correct?
Well, they evidently really liked her to come. So she, actually, I think it was about 5 times she came back and forth. And the last time they asked her to come, she said, well, I got married and you're going to, in order for me to come, there'll have to be a job for my husband. And so they made him their farm manager so that she would come.
Miss Dunn, is that the uniform that we have on display?
They had a number of them, but this is very similar, the one that I gave you, to what she's wearing in that picture.
Yes, thanks. So y'all can look at that after the presentation. We actually have that here. A similar uniform to the one she's wearing in this picture.
That is the nurse's bag and the uniforms that we will have here on display tonight. We haven't taken them out of the plastic bag.
When Mrs. Dunnington needed a farm manager, she wrote Mr. and Mrs. Dowler. They came from Canada and lived with Mrs. Dunnington until I arrived. Then the little log cabin schoolhouse was enlarged and became our home. Mr. and Mrs. Dowler continued to eat their meals up at the big house, and they still do for 2 meals. In this way, Mrs. Dunnington was able to discuss the management of her farm and keep up with its daily progress.
So is that the cabin that came from Norway?
Yes.
Nelson, can you tell us what happened to the cabin?
It got moved somewhere.
When you sold the place?
When I sold it, it was still there.
It was dismantled and moved to another piece of property. So
After 2000.
Right.
it's still intact elsewhere.
We have our picture taken
married to my Uncle Tommy, who's on the right. And then that would be my grandmother, Nanny, we always called her. And I think that is my older sister, on her lap.
Is one of them married into the Covington family?
Yes, on Chilton's.
Oh, no, that's right.
Tommy was.
Edwina, does that answer your question? Okay.
I personally feel that the deep interest Mrs. Dunnington has in everything that goes on the farm, in her home, in her community, and to those in her increasing family circle has kept her young these 101 years. She has continually looked forward from one Christmas to the next, and likewise all the seasonal events that occur in between. In January, Mrs. Dunnington is already thinking about getting her garden seeds ordered, and by late February, some seeds are planted in hotbeds covered against the cool nights and opened to the warm sunshine by day, and also the early vegetables are planted in the gardens. The kinds of vegetables grown in Mrs. Dunnington's garden include almost all of those that you would see leaving through a seed catalog.
So, from reading this, I kind of got the impression that Ms. Dunnington had a set schedule all the way through the year, and certain things had to be done at certain times and evidently repeated every year, weather permitting, I guess.
Some of the less familiar for Prince Edward gardens are eggplant, salsify, okra, peanuts, sweet potato, pumpkin, and an onion that continues to bear from year to year. Mrs. Dunnington gets much pleasure from giving fresh vegetables and berries to her friends and relatives. By the garden path is a sage bush, the leaves of which are pinched off at the proper time, dried in the attic, and then used as seasoning in her sausage. Y'all can vote on whether you want sage in your sausage or not. There are fruit trees, apple, pear, peach, and cherry, which provide not only fruit but blossoms for the vases in the home. Spring is in the air, and there is a renewed faith in a life with the bursting forth of each new plant.
And I believe the picture there on the right is an actual picture of the garden. And didn't I get that picture from you, Liz?
I'm not sure of that. It may be, there were so many.
Yes.
It may be.
I believe it is.
It's an interesting place, I do recall that.
Yeah.
The garden.
They call those potato onions. They have
Potato.
potato onions. They have sprouts at the top, we plant those year after year.
Young Mrs. Virginia Dowler in the garden.
There's two separate pictures there.
And those turned out really well. Colorado.
Yes.
They were in black and white. That's not.
Soon the sweet potato bed is laid. This is the process. In a 24-inch deep cold frame, first a layer of straw is tramped down to the depth of 6 inches, then a firm 6-inch layer of horse manure. Next, 6 inches of woods earth is spread lightly. On top of this, the seed sweet potatoes, some of several varieties, are placed so they do not touch each other and are barely covered with sand. When the sweet potatoes begin to sprout, hog's hair is sprinkled over them lightly. Does anybody know why hog's hair was sprinkled over them? I haven't. I read it, I was curious.
Was it real hogs? Would have been.
Insulation.
Insulation, maybe to keep the moisture.
Talking about hog's hair mixed in what?
We're just going back.
Yeah.
That's her exact word.
A lot of times they use it to blend with the soil, but they also use it to put in plaster as well. Hog's hair. After the killing and Thanksgiving.
These are the questions we have to ask before they're gone. Nobody knows.
Sounds like that everything had to be exact. Exact number of inches deep. She must have been held to work for.
She was exacting. Then the entire bed is kept moist, but not wet. My May new slips are ready to plant in the field. This past fall, 175 bushels of sweet potatoes were harvested. These are allowed to dry and cure in the furnace room, then sorted and packed in pine tags in a pit dug in the ground under Mrs. Dunnington's house. Besides being cooked for human use, some of the sweet potatoes are cooked for the chickens. Hogs, I imagine. In the yard are many different trees, namely red maple, white maple, locust, ash, black walnut, pecan, holly, spruce, elm, mulberry, mimosa, mock orange, magnolia, and ginkgo, but no poplars. There are, of course, poplars in the woods. You're probably thinking this would be a good place for a biology lesson. It is, and Dr. Robert Brumfield of Longwood College does bring some of his classes out to Poplar Hill.
I expect some of y'all might have known Dr. Brumfield.
I worked as his research assistant for 2 years.
Was that Southern Scott?
No, that was here in Oak Ridge.
I was one of those students that went out there.
Wonderful.
Had let's see, daffodils all around. In fact, after they developed the golf course, you could still see some of those old daffodil beds on both sides of the road. In fact, I thinned out some of them.
I'm sure they won't be there.
As we mentioned golf course, I'll throw this in. I don't have the pictures in this program, but the Dunningtons had a golf course there when they lived there. And I guess 100 years later, we have another one.
Margaret, is that really a picture of Dr. Brumfield?
Yes?
Yeah, and I've got a picture of his father, who was a physician, and Bob was saying back then to get people inoculated for certain diseases, he would go to the minority Baptist churches on Sunday and inoculate the individuals. They got another one with hogs. I probably should give that to you, where they slaughtered hogs. I think there's 7 or 8 hanging up, and of course they had already been scalded and eventually taken out, entrails taken out, and so forth. And there's one gentleman, I've never had to figure it out, and I meant to ask the picture of a doctor, and I think it must have been Dr. Brumfield. And it may have been his daughter was the first female student at BPI.
The trees plus the flowering shrubs, plants, bulbs, and annual flowers in the formal garden provide first-hand knowledge. There are also the unusual plants which are put in the conservatory or pit during cold weather. Mrs. Dunnington has several lemon trees which bear fruit the size of a grapefruit. She keeps poinsettia plants from year to year, and they were blooming beautifully this Christmas. There is a bird of paradise plant as well as palms and ferns. I'd say that's pretty unusual for this area in the winter. Mrs. Dunnington loves to be outside in her gardens. Through the years, she has done much of the work herself. Weeding, watering, picking, and managing all that the hired help does. She shells peas, shucks corn, peels tomatoes, and this winter, as usual, has been shelling pecans from her own trees. She likes to do all this herself.
Seems like the farm was pretty self-contained, pretty self-sufficient.
Mrs. Dunnington was one of the charter members of Farmville's Longwood Garden Club, and she entered many exhibits in the flower shows. I well remember the temporary houses built over her rows of prized dahlias and chrysanthemums, heated by oil to protect them against the cold. She pinched the buds back herself to get larger flowers. She deserved every prize she won.
That's inside the solarium. There's what it looks like today. And as I recall, those pipes were the heat room.
Correct.
They had radiators.
Yes.
Dunnington's sister, Elizabeth Betty Bland Knight, was also a flower lover, and during her lifetime in Florida Hills, she took care of the former flower garden.
Here's that Betty never was married and she lived there with her sister. This is from Liz's family album, and I remember the day we were doing some scanning, we were trying to read what it said there in the top left corner, but I looked at it under, blew it up and looked, and it said views of Aunt Betty's garden. That's what that is.
The farm work that goes on about her, Mrs. Dunnington watches with interest. The 430 open acres are used to raise small grain, corn, soybeans, and feed for the beef cattle and hogs pastured on the farm.
I bet she watched with interest.
Until December 1957, a little over a year ago, there were 6 milk cows which supplied fresh milk, buttermilk, and butter, which was churned each morning. Mrs. Dunnington is always up early, seeing that the work of the day begun.
That is not an actual picture at all. We got a substitute picture there.
Each morning except Sundays, beaten biscuits are made. The dough is beaten for half an hour by the butler, Lester Bigger, who has been with Mrs. Dunnington since April 9th, 1934. The dough is laid on an oilcloth covered red oak tree stump and beaten with a metal mallet. That pounding was usually the first sound I'd hear upon waking while I was living at Poplar Hill. Then the dough is run through metal rollers to get an even thickness of half an inch, then cut with a special cutter and baked. If you all go to our website, there's actually the recipe for these beaten biscuits written in Lester Bigger's hand. That we got from a relative, one of the Dunnington great-grandchildren.
Tell them the website.
www.dunningtonmansion.org. Speaking of beaten biscuits brings back fond memories of Mrs. Dunnington's kindness. Whenever our family took a trip to Canada, Mrs. Dunnington gave us a box of beaten biscuits filled with her smoke-cured ham to be eaten along the way. And a box of these was worth going to Canada. Another daily breakfast item, except Sundays when waffles were served, is cornmeal batter cakes. These are baked on a long iron griddle. These thin cakes are stacked up with butter in between. Yum, yum. This daily use of cornmeal, plus corn sticks and crackling bread, calls for a trip to Allen's Mill every 3 weeks. About 4 bushels of white corn, which is grown on the farm, is carried to Allen's Mill, which is located 3 miles south of Prospect. There the corn is ground by millstones, which are run by water. This water-ground meal is the only kind Mrs. Dunnington will use.
Allen's Mill was located about a mile behind Bill Witter's house in Prospect, coming back towards this direction.
Is it still standing?
No, it's gone.
Does anybody know what crackle bread is? I had to ask.
It's about, pick that rim the dental.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's in the bread?
Yeah. Many times.
It sounds good. Most of the food served at Poplar Hill is cooked on a wood-burning range. Each winter, approximately 85 cords of wood are cut in the woods. The cutting is usually done in January and February, and then in August, the wood is hauled from the woods to form a huge pile by the wood house to be sawed up for use in the big house, old kitchen, and to supply all the servants who live on the farm.
Kitchen was on the back of the house, right?
The kitchen is on the back of the house.
Kitchen was in the basement in the old part of the house, but they had another house down there where they did the big cooking.
So they had a separate kitchen, separate for the house. It's pretty common for that time, thank you.
We're learning stuff tonight.
Yeah, not only did they cook on that, but actually they had a reservoir going in, that was where the hot water was.
They had it down later. Put it
for baking, more wood for baking.
for baking bread, cakes, and things like that.
Fireplace in the old kitchen takes huge logs which are stacked nearby in preparation for hog killing time, usually the first Monday after Thanksgiving if the weather's cold enough. This is a busy week when extra help is hired to handle the killing of 30 hogs. Early Monday mornings, the corn-fattened hogs are killed and cleaned.
That eat 30 hogs. I like that.
That's the smokehouse.
That's a smokehouse that was in the background.
That's a lot of work.
That's the cookhouse. You see the background right there? That was the other
Right there.
regular cook.
That's the cookhouse. Okay, that's where they did a lot of the cooking separate from the
That's the smokehouse.
Are any of those buildings still there?
Tuesday, the hogs are cut up and some of the meat is salted down. Wednesday, the lard is made, and Thursday, the sausage is ground. The fresh pork cuts are wrapped and taken to the Appomattox locker plant for freezing and storage. Does that place go to this?
Yeah.
Yes, but it's not frozen food locker anymore.
Mrs. Dunnington sends much of her staged seasoned sausage to her friends and relatives, some as far away as New York. This sharing brings pleasure to Mrs. Dunnington.
I wonder if she froze it before she sent it up, or how did it?
I guess country cured ham is pretty much already on its own,
Sausage, Jimmy, when I was a child, you could take sausage and form it like you would a roll of bologna and wrap it in a bed sheet and hang it up in a smokehouse with your hams and smoke it just like that. And the outside of that sausage would get darker and you would cut it off, throw that away. But the interior was the best sausage you ever had in your life.
So is that more like a summer sausage as opposed to like ground breakfast sausage?
Another thing that they do, they put it in a lard tin, and then they would melt the lard and put the lard on top to seal the sauce from it.
Okay, let's see what it was.
Put it in a glass jar, make little round balls, put it in a jar, and pour the hot lard over it, and it would solidify when it got cool, and that sealed the sausage in the jar.
I remember Armstrong, the first time I seen sausage balls in the jars. And I like the cherry pie, and down in the cellar, she'd had the sausage and the cherry cans right together. And I go, she said, go get your 2 cans. She knew what I liked, she could cook it. And it was good sausage. The shower.
After the hog killing is over, Mrs. Dunnington hoped for a good cold spell so the ice house could be filled. This past December, the ice was 4.5 inches thick. At the pond, when the ice is this thick, a man walks out on the ice and cuts an inverted V-shaped section with an axe. This is pulled ashore, broken up, and hauled to the ice house, where the earthen pit, 25 feet deep and 18 feet wide at the top, is lined with straw.
That's not an exact picture of their pond, but that's good representation.
They may have cut it out of the river too, but behind the house.
And they could go into the summer.
They had a
and put
pond,
it
they had a pond, where they cut the ice.
Nelson, you said they had a pond specifically for
Jimmy Norris across from his place where they have that hunting lodge. There's an ice house, and the sides are about that high. They dig into it, and they put sawdust in there, and then they would cut the ice off of the water.
thick ice is thrown down a chute by hand and thin ice is shoveled in. When the ice house is full of ice, it's covered with leaves. Besides using this ice in a water cooler, food is taken down to the ice house to cool.
I think most people use sawdust.
That no longer exists either.
That's ice house.
That's the ice house, Nelson says, and it's gone.
That is the ice house, and there's another shop up there.
amazing too, those old ice houses, a lot of them, like has been mentioned, was dug down in the ground, but they were rock lined. And as Marvin said, a lot of people, when they put the ice in there, not only did they put straw as an insulation, but they put sawdust. And the amazing thing was, sometimes that ice would last into the middle of July. That's how long it would last.
They had big trap doors and floor to let ice in.
Big tap water. For her personal drinking water, Mrs. Dunnington uses water from Charles Pickett's spring. This water is claimed to be very pure, and at one time, water from this spring was sold commercially.
Picket Springs was nearby, about kind of over behind, as that was called. That's an A at the farm of Earl where Mrs. Pickett sold water.
Christmas is the biggest event of the year at Poplar Hill. All the family gathers to enjoy the day. There are now 5 generations and 4 are named Indianite. Mrs. India Dunnington, 101, Sally Dunnington, Latham, Indianite Lindstrom Wallahan, Indianite Lindstrom Can, and Indianite Can H. Makes it very difficult to research these people, by the way. They're all named the same thing.
Same with the men too.
Yes.
They kept using the same names, but different order.
That's Dr. Brumfield seated on the floor.
Right there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. We have Buck Sidner, is the young gentleman in a sort of red jacket there in the middle. He presented at our December event. He said he doesn't remember exactly what his mother was getting onto him for, but she is definitely telling him he better straighten up.
Buck would be about 70 today. I said.
74.
74.
There were about, I'd say, 30 Dunnington family members at the December event that had held.
Mid-morning of Christmas Day is the time for exchanging presents, which have been waiting under the huge Christmas tree. Santa has greeted many grandchildren as the doors to the room are opened. After the excitement of opening gifts is over, the paper and ribbon are gathered up in a huge basket and taken to the attic to be reclaimed for another year.
Like they didn't have enough money to buy right paper.
I'd say India probably remembered the times where they didn't have a whole lot, especially after the war. Several hours later, the Christmas Day meal is served. Each helps himself to numerous fancy dishes that have been prepared or supervised by Mrs. Dunnington's daughter, Mrs. Sally Highland. The ham is at one end of the table and the turkey is at the other. The meal is finished off with ice cream for the children and a flaming pudding for the adults, and no one needs any supper at night. I remember some of the great-grandchildren lamenting that, unfortunately, when Mrs. Dunnington passed away, they never got to graduate from the children's table to the adult table, which was this wonderful thing. They never quite made it there.
From the fireplaces in the background of a lot of these pictures, we can determine what room they were actually in. You know what room that was?
We call it, I was going to say, now you know about that in there.
In reference to
The second dining room.
coming in the front door, was that on the right
On the left.
or left?
There's a room behind that, came to the front door, he went to the left, into that room, and then into this room.
So, yes, that was the second room on the left after entering the front
She
entrance.
would go all the way down the hall and go into
Well, I guess it was by the kitchen
Yeah.
area, which makes sense. That's Nancy or Mrs. Dunnington seated there. We're fortunate to have all these pictures. Southern Brumfield gave us, I guess it was his family photo album. We've got 500 or 600 pictures of the family in and around the house and different poses and the people that work there. Gradually, we're getting some of them up and where we show them, and some of them were getting colorized.
Yeah, Bob Brumfield took a pictures, even at Longwood. In fact, he took films of circus and a lot of stuff. And when he retired, I came into the desk one day, there was a whole box of film that he had taken. And so I took it to the library, no sound, but he was able to convert it from 35 millimeters so that you could see it on television. So no sound, but it's got the daisy ring, I think they used to call it.
Daisy chain.
Graves and a few of the plays. In fact, when I worked for him, he was busy one time and they had a play and he said, well, Scott, you go ahead and cover the play tonight. I said, I've never done that. He said, well, just scan slowly. That's all you need to know.
All of that now can be digitized.
Oh, yeah, yeah. In fact, that's done at the library. But I made a note. I said, don't put my name on this. It's Dr. Bromfield's work.
Soon after Christmas, Mrs. Dunnington is at her desk writing thank you notes. Writing occupies much of her time as she keeps in touch with her sons in New York and other members of the family constantly. Needlework also has been a source of enjoyment to Mrs. Dunnington. Through the years, she has done much crocheting and embroidering for the Presbyterian Church bazaars and as gifts as well as for her own use. She has made many crocheted bedspreads, which require many hours of work. In the last several years, she has been doing much weaving of squares, which she makes into baby crib blankets and afghans, which she gives away. Mrs. Dunnington has been a lifetime of giving her time and money to help others. There's a bronze plaque in the foyer of the Southside Community Hospital, which indicates how others feel about Mrs. Dunnington. Is it still there?
Yeah, I went over to the hospital, took a
Okay,
picture.
so it is still there.
I remembered where it was from being a kid for some reason. And it just, I know where that is. Right when you go in the old hospital front door, walk maybe 3 or 4 steps, look to your left, and there it is still on the wall. And that's the actual picture I took. And this picture.
In appreciation of her loyal devotion to this community and for her keen interest and generous support of the Southside Community Hospital on her 100th birthday, June 6, 1957.
When we were over at Longwood being drilled, I guess you would say, they asked for a documentary. I know they asked me, how did the community feel about the Dunnington family? Were they supportive of the community? And I told them, oh yes, they practically got the hospital built for us. And it's very instrumental in a lot of things. That was the last page of the typewritten. Go ahead and read it.
To Amy there, the great Dunnington appreciation of her loyal devotion to the community and for keen interest and generous support of the Southside Community Hospital on her 100th birthday, June 6, 1957. Written by Virginia Stella, took off March 12, 1959.
So, next thing. Liz, would you tell us who that is?
That's my mother on the left and my father on the right. And this was in the garden at Poplar Hill. They had that sundial, which everybody in my family seemed to want to take pictures there. And a lot of the Dunnington family pictures were taken there as well. And in that same area was a fish pond and it was just really outside my grandparents' house, which was the cabin. It was real near to all of that, but that's shortly before they got married. And that's my mother and Uncle Tommy. My grandfather liked to grow cantaloupes, and he had a bumper crop that year. And that is my mother and Uncle Tommy and my grandfather. You can see the house in the background and the garden that was sort of in front of the cabin. I'm not sure exactly. I was little when I last saw it, but all of that was very near proximity to where my grandparents lived.
Was that a
Do you
real-
remember?
Yes, that's the fish pond, and they had pipe water that makes a waterfall come out of that. Yeah.
And there was a bench or something or another on the other side and
Yes,
all that,
yes,
wasn't it?
yes, it was, yes.
Was
Because
that
I
a
think
root
some of
cell?
the pictures.
What?
Was that a root
Was
cell?
that a root cell?
Yes, it was, yeah, behind that.
And that little car, I think, was Watt Dunnington's little car, and that's my mother sitting in it. You know, my mother and uncle were kind of their children too, I guess you would say. They, you know, were little kids living right beside them, and no wonder Mama thought it was a wonderful place to grow up. But that's her in one of the Dunnington kids' cars.
You gotta be pretty rich to have a toy like that.
Yes. And I guess my mother got the advantage of living next door to the rich folks.
So did you have to colorize that?
Yes.
How do you know what color, how do you go about doing that?
Can't tell you.
He wanted it to match his shirt.
It's what they're now calling AI. What the program does is software, and it will take a grayscale picture, and each tone of each little digit of gray corresponds, it thinks, to a color. So it'll look at the gray and say, all right, this should be green, and this dot should be another color. And it'll think, it takes a minute to think, then I just flash up the color picture.
You got the grass right.
And then if you don't like it, you have it represented, you can then tweak it, which takes a lot of time. I looked at this and I said, is this, somebody get wild with spray paint, or is this, the AI screwing up? I couldn't figure it out. I said, I'll just leave it like that, because that's how it popped up there. There's the wider view. Couldn't tell what was in the background there exactly.
Well, that's spring is a year now.
Maybe it was East,
That goes into
East
front of
one.
the house.
Okay.
And that's my mother, and I assume Uncle Tommy and my grandmother. And that's Uncle Tommy, right there at the top of the hill. He loved motorcycles.
And Tommy lived in the
Well,
house.
a scooter in this case, yes.
He did have one.
He did. He rode him to Canada.
Did he live there right at the entrance to?
His home that he was living in when he passed away, it is right there on 15 still. And was on the corner, that property was deeded to them by this,
And he lived in the White House.
on the farm.
On the farm.
Yes, for a while before that, he and Jewel.
Then this dog gave him 5 acres to build the house.
They wanted people to stay close to them. They really did, which is kind of interesting.
I've got a question for y'all. I've been meaning to ask, where was exactly the part of the highway they call Dunnington's Curve? I know the highway was different out there at the time.
Yeah, it came, well, we almost did own the story. It came behind the story between that and Bill Whitman's house. And it came down to where the road is now. That driveway was part of the whole road. Went across the road and came around and back across the road, and came in by the telephone office. That we were behind 5 days of steel.
Several descriptions out that way I've heard it say, like a mile past Dunnington's Curve. I'm thinking which curve was that?
Well, that
Scope, he had a farm across the road, his family did, Armstead's.
It seems to me that Bill Whitten told me that the golf course that you mentioned was right behind his house too.
Could have been, I don't know.
Down the little, it looked like a little short, Nelson kept telling me there used to be golf, short, you know, whatever. But then when we were in that area, it looked like a little golf club for a short person.
There's more down in
I'll remember
that
that.
house, the chest, and the dam upon the way. Most of the golf courses back that way.
Well, when I was on the board of supervisors, I think it was Mr. Kennedy from New Jersey that came down to the board, and he wanted to put a golf course in there, and he had a residential area all around it. He had a hospital, well, a medical center there, and a couple other things. He wanted the board of supervisors to do the water, sewer, all of that. And I remember Bill Henley, Maxwell, I guess, was the other guy. We couldn't meet separately, but going in, I said, I don't think Farmville or Prince Edward County can afford it, but he has a vision of it. I guess he lost, I think he had already taken a contract out on the head hospital. But that's good. That's good for you.
Yeah, it was.
But we didn't hear from him anymore.
No. I got his money, right?
So Liz, one more question. Did you ride that motorcycle all the way to Canada?
Not this one. Not, of course, this is a scooter, but he had a gold wing. Yeah, he had a gold wing that he and Jewel rode together. Oh, they were several times back and forth to Canada riding.
I've been so that she,
Do we know who this is? Yeah. Is it one of the Dunnington Mansion?
Yes, it's one of the names in that album.
I'm not sure exactly.
This would be a granddaughter of Indiana in that generation.
And have you picked the color tells you the color.
He likes blue.
The board actually pops up.
Okay, well, I'm thinking a Ford, always painted everything black.
Kind of got up to that period, they might have been, or it could have been a repaint. The picture on the left is a black and white picture I started with over Liz's album, and down the right there is the colorized, so you can see how it takes it from one to the other. And of course, the one on the right I cropped, it's made a little bit bigger.
Well, Liz had access to the colors now that you've done that. You'll get the colors.
Oh, he's taking a thumb drive.
And hopefully in the future, maybe Heather and I can get back to Liz and copy a few more. A few that I did, Liz didn't come out.
Well, and maybe we'll get a new scan.
Today,
We
Liz
were
and I
really
were,
flying that day.
Liz and I went to Longwood thinking we had the whole library to ourselves because it was, the girls were gone, we thought. Turned out to be girls' state. They came in and the man says, "There'll be 300 girls in here. I hope they don't bother y'all." They don't bother me. But I mean, we were crowded in. Parents, everybody was with the girls, and got quite crowded, and we kind of adjourned a little early.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It looks like it's maybe both children, infants, are Afro-American.
Yes, I figured they were children of the workers there, probably.
Well, I think this is a part of history that people that weren't in the South and didn't have a workforce, they didn't realize the relationships that developed between the workers, farm hands, and the individuals. And I think it's something like this that you would have actually proved that there was a closeness and a concern for both races. And I think that one picture really speaks to a lot of things.
One of the earliest slides mentioned, two of them mentioned Lester Biggers. And he had been there most of his life, and in the 70s, I can remember, he would bring Miss Dunnington to the grocery store I worked at. And he was the chauffeur, and she would be in the back. And for many years, she was chauffeured around by Lester. And I went to the extent of finding out what happened to that Cadillac after they both died. I heard that Mrs. Dunnington's daughters gave the Cadillac to Lester. And somehow he got a house there, up the road.
Lester Biggers, did he get a house? Yeah, I believe that she did give him and his
Yes,
wife.
yeah. On 85 acres. That property's right behind Clyde Davis's house now. It was there.
Okay. The Dunnington Mansion Foundation is actually doing some research on Mr. Biggers. We didn't have any children, so we had to kind of go beyond that. If anybody here today has any specific memories, please come talk to me afterwards. We were able to track down a great-grandnephew and the family through that and get a little bit more stories and we're updating the website.
I think his wife was a school teacher.
Yeah, she was actually on the board of supervisors, so a principal in Prince Edward County at the time.
Yeah, my grandparents were Armstrongs in Collierstown, Virginia. And actually, most of you are familiar with the book Sounder. My uncle Bill Armstrong lived in Hampton, Sydney, wrote the book Sounder, and it's the story that Uncle Charlie, who was an Afro-American, lived about half a mile from the farm. Granddaddy used him as a worker, and it must have been well educated because he had a background in Greek mythology and so forth. And my mother used to say when he finished on the farm, before he went away, some of the children had problems with schoolwork. There was a round table, and Uncle Charlie Jones, would help the children with mathematics or whatever they were having trouble with at the time. So, in fact, his son, after Sounder got so popular, the children wanted to find out where he was buried and put a concrete stone for his grave. And they went all over the place. They finally found it was in Brownsville, I think. So they just found that and are in the process of giving him credit for the story Sounder and his name and address. But it took a long time just to try to figure out where he was buried.
Yeah, it turns out that happened more than I think a lot of people think. So Mr. Baker was college educated, and the great-grandchildren tell stories of him and helping him with calculus.
Well, I was concerned about his guest background, and I asked grandmother, I said, where does Uncle Charlie go to church? And I said, well, he used to come to the Presbyterian Church in Collierstown. And she said he was up in the balcony. I'd seen the balcony, but I didn't think there were that many workers. They have a slave balcony, but evidently he was up there. And she said that occasionally the minister would call on him to pray, and said he would come down to the edge of the balcony. And I said, well, what sort of prayers Charlie had? I didn't know that much about his background. And he said, well, they were usually very moving. And he said by the time he finished, in her words, there was nary a dry eye in the congregation.
he was from Ireland and had immigrated to Canada, and then she was Canadian. And they lived and worked here almost all of their lives, but never became citizens. And I have both of their green cards, their last green cards.
I was looking at that, see the photograph there?
See that?
That's one of the pictures we have here.
Right.
That is, I guess, the group, the Dunningtons again.
Yeah, that's India and the black bird.
That's Danny right there.
That was India.
And I don't know who that is.
On the left is White Dunnington. This is actually one of the ones you scanned from me. He had sent that picture to my grandmother, and on the back it's written about that's what they had caught on their excursion or whatever, and that my grandmother was to show it to his mother. He sent it to her to show to Mama. But
I looked at that, I thought, I hope that didn't come out of the fish pond.
But they were very fond of my grandmother. You know, they had that kind of relationship.
This is just an article that was in the Farmville Pearl. We had that article, June 1960. And I guess that's about her having her 103rd birthday. And there's where she died in July, about a month later, at the age of 103. We didn't read that, but we just do have it. No, just wanted to say that we do have it. And that is genuine, that came from her obit in the paper, I believe. And there's just the other part of her obit, which we may have. And that's all of the programs.
Jimmy.
Yes.
Could you put that in there? Would you like me to read the first one?
I guess they're reading it. Okay. Anyone got any questions while we all still seated? Everything to say?
Did someone say that Robert Broomfield had a sister?
Robert Broomfield had a sister.
I don't know.
Sorry.
Or
So,
daughter?
in fact, I was wondering whether or not his sister was the one that went to EPI, was the first female. And I asked Southern about that, and he wasn't really sure.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay.
It was a Broomfield. In fact, they came from Blacksboro to Farmville.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It's a problem as you get older that you didn't ask more questions.
Yeah.
We had a conversation in Lowe's parking lot like an hour about Bob. Learned much.
We've got refreshments in the back, cold water in the refrigerator. Bob has got a door prize for us. Do you want to have it drawn?
Okay, tonight, we brought out another one of, tonight's door door prize will be a copy of Charles Edward Burrell's History of Prince Edward County, and reprinted this back in 1997. We brought this out tonight because it does have Black Dunnington, and also tells a little bit about Zach Blanton with S.W. Paulette's wartime experiences, which covers about 80 pages in here. And it mentions Zach and that he was wounded at Gettysburg. So I figured this would be an appropriate book tonight to give out the door prize. And who has the LD? Okay. LD's got the basket with all the numbers. Everybody have a number? Everybody got a ticket?
Anybody didn't get a ticket?
We're all good there. Okay. You got skin in the game here.
I got my ticket in my pocket. So if nobody else wins, I know I did. Tell us what it is.
Last three numbers. 2. That's that many. 6. That's more. I feel the suspense here. 269. Marsha. There you go, Marsha. Congratulations.
Everybody, when you get ready to leave, put your ticket stubs back here in the basket, and we'll be able to get all this trash can.
Next month, we'll again talk about the Dunnington Mansion. And Heather hopefully will have a documentary here. Nelson and I probably. And Heather's going to hang around here a few minutes. If you got any questions for her or the Dunnington Mansion Foundation, she'll be glad to answer them for you. Cold water, cookies are in the back. Help yourself.
All right, sugarholics.
original house, first addition or the second stage of construction, the third stage of construction, second addition, and then Mr. Dunnington's portion were these two rooms here plus all the ancillary structures on the outside, and that gives us a four-stage construction theory. Richard did a wonderful job of making these visuals to try to help you guys kind of follow it through. So there we go, construction stage 1, 1830, the two-room over two-room construction. So very, very common for this area of Virginia in that time period. Here comes the first addition in 1840, built on the back, also very common to see happen. Second addition, or the third stage of construction, gets built on back towards the east. So again, we're facing west to east. And here comes Dunnington, adding in all of this stuff in the front. So those are four major construction stages. There also were bathrooms added, so fifth and sixth construction stage. Two of them are done in brick and one of them is done in wood. And then there's a shed that was put off the back of the mansion right in front of the ice house, where the ice house would see this right here. And so technically 7-ish stages of construction, but 4 of them being the major construction timeline. Clint gave us a great drone shot here so that we could illustrate to you guys. So if you divide the slate roof part of the house in half, basically right between those two chimneys, the back half was the oldest portion of all of this construction. And then we go back from there with here's the first addition, second addition, Dunnington's addition on the front. We've got the brick bathrooms here. There's the wooden bathroom and then a shed that was put on the back. So that gives you guys kind of a visual if you've been out there looking at the mansion, exactly how we think this happened. Give you a top-down view. This is a little easier to see. So 2/2 original with the additions in the early mid-1800s. And then Dunnington comes in and puts these rooms on the front, but then extends his roof line to incorporate the oldest portion of the house as well, just not the additions.
So you're not tearing the roof off the first part.
Correct, which is, yeah, this roof had to be removed, that roof had to be removed, and then he built this over it. And as we get into the evidence, because we have pictures of evidence, that was one of the most compelling, the attic evidence is really the most compelling evidence that we found to support this theory. So what it suggests, one of the most interesting things is that the orientation of the original house did not change like DHR said it did. Okay, so the original house would have been oriented in the exact same direction, and Dunnington kept that orientation when he added the front on. Also, the reported original staircase was actually added in the first edition. So it wasn't the original staircase. When we examined inside the mansion, we think that the original staircase to the 1830s house is what is actually leading up to the attic on the second floor, which fits this full work nicely. So what that actually means for us when we talk about preserving the history, so we're going to preserve the history, but we also want to set the historical record correct. It also for us means that the original house and the oldest, most historically significant portion has been offered protection by the slate roof. So the most damaged portions are what was under that standing seam metal that we have pictures of in the back. And to me, having that be additions that were just added on to original 1830s house, it's nice to know that the oldest portion has actually been spared some of the worst damage. We had Dr. Mary Freeville from Hampton Sydney College. She's retired now, come out. So I drove Richard out, and then Richard drove her out. So we're all together.
She was actually glad to come.
Yeah, I guess I should say. She volunteered, I promise we didn't force her. So she came out and definitely she agrees with her expertise as well. So what we're trying to do is take our evidence and also have experts in the field look at our theory to sort of Dr. Mark Castro, anthropology at Longwood, also came out. He agrees with the theory as well. And here, just reach out to Lily Graham, who's the former curator of architecture at Colonial Williamsburg. So we have some communication out there to Mr. Graham. And we're really crossing our fingers that he might want to come down and give his opinion as well. All right, so we're going to look at some actual evidence of this. So we're going to look at where the original house, the 1830s house, meets the Dunnington addition. And the biggest things that we see here are the brick type, the brick pattern, and the windows. So the brick type, so these are all close-ups. So the brick type, we have the oiled brick in a running bond on the Dunnington addition. Okay, here in the front. Here in the front, and these pictures are really hard to see. I apologize. So if you're there in real life, it stands up actually quite well.
The gutter is the dividing line.
Yes, right here.
The downspout.
The downspout. So you divided line. And the windows are different on either side of that downspout dividing line. So here's a close-up of those. And then we have a close-up of the original house and the brick pattern that is here. Richard, please feel free to use all this special one.
Things changed very slowly in Confederate County in terms of architectural style. And the Flemish bond, which is the headers and the stretchers, the short bricks and the long bricks, with the dots and the strokes there. That was the style of brick laying that was done in the 18th century. But here we are 50 years almost beyond the 18th century, and they still think of it as a fashionable brick laying style, but they don't want to do it all the way, so they do it every fifth row. I mean, the same thing happens at Hamden House out of Hampton City, which was built in 1858, and it still has enough Flemish bond in it that it looks fashionable.
And we'll see that. So the brick holds between the original house and the first addition. The 3 rows of the stretchers and the headers in between. Also, the evidence is looking, there are step backs. If you look at the mansion here, there's a step back here and there's a step back here. It's a little hard to see in a 2-dimensional picture. There we tried to catch it for you. See? That's just evidence that there was a different portion and a different construction timeline. You wouldn't do that if you were building all of this stuff together as one portion. It just wasn't done. So we're still looking at the north elevation here, and we're looking at the second edition. So first edition here, second edition here, and it changes. So this is what you were talking about, Richard. So we get into where we have the headers there, where the stretchers go to 5 and 6 rows in between. So the brickwork changes. Okay, the brickwork changes. So this was obviously built at a different timeline. So we can already prove just right off the bat that 2 stages is incorrect. 3 stages is definitely, and then 4 stages is where we have to get into other proof to prove the 4 stages. One thing I found really odd, so north elevation, south elevation of this same portion. Okay, so this was built at the same time, right? Square, right? And if you look at the one side, this is what the brick pattern is, and if you look at the other side, they go back to the 3 rows. So the guy that was building this side, the guy that was building this side, we're on the same page, apparently. Why, we don't know. We'll never know. But it's just fascinating when you start to look at this brick, and it's just, why did that happen? Nobody knows. All right. So the most compelling evidence that we had was actually in the attic space itself. I think I have 2 slides we need to show. We'll have to see. So again, in this, I was joking with my husband when he came up and he looked at this picture, especially before I had this, and he was like, what the heck is that? And I was like, this is the most compelling slide we have to prove our current theory. And he's like, okay, great. So here we have, if I can kind of show you guys, so this roof line here is the first addition. Okay, so this is the first addition. There's sort of the standing seam metal. So we're standing in the attic, walls go up, and way up here is the big roof, the slate roof. Okay, so this is in the giant attic space, back corner of the attic space. So here's the roof line, we'll have some more pictures. There's the metal. Okay, so we knew this part. But what we found here was the evidence of another roof line. This would be the roof line that was torn off by Dunnington. Okay, this one was too, but this one was completely torn off so that he could build the attic space on top. We'll also see where we have the, I guess, technically we call this joist or rafters because you're on the second floor. Joist. Excuse me, I'm a veterinarian, not an architect. So we have them oriented this way, so this is the north-south direction, and then we have another picture back here where they're oriented this way. You can look at the picture. Okay. So here we go. This is the first edition here. So we're standing, this is all under the big slate roof. So there it is. You can see the metal on top. Okay. Running this way and running this way, which shows that there's two. We knew that part of it, but over here in this corner is where that other roof line is. Okay. And this also shows you what's actually interesting. So this would be the line right here. Right here is the line. If DHR was correct, and they said Dunnington built all this big massive thing, and all this back that way was the old house, right? So that's their theory. Well, when we look at these joists, right? Here they're running this way and they're running this way. Okay, this is hand hewn. Okay, Dunnington didn't do anything hand hewn. This is all sawn. Okay, 1897. This is sawn lumber. This is not. So that is really big evidence right there that this whole part of the structure was not Dunnington. We're going to look at the chimneys now too. Richard spied this. This is very cool to catch. Very, very hard to see. You just have to remember. I mean, we're with flashlights, you know, up in an attic here trying to look at all this stuff. So we said that we're saying that Dunnington portion is here. Here's the old portion of the house. The downspout divides it right in between the two chimneys. So the question was, well, if this is the old house, there's a new chimney on that, right? That's all new. It matches that one. Well, if you go up in the attic, look at the north chimney and the south chimney. This is all the old brick. This was the original. There was an original chimney here to this original house. And when Dunnington did all this stuff, he added to it and built it on up. And you can see the oil pressed brick meet that old brick right here where they bonded them together and then the chimney goes up. And you can see that on both of the chimneys on the inside. As an evidence in the basement, we're kind of back to looking at the joist again. What's interesting is the Dunnington addition just has a crawl space under it. So the rest of the house has an actual basement, and the features that are in that basement, again, hand-hewn joists. This whole basement under the back two rooms that were attributed to Dunnington is not 1897 at all. There's no basement under the Dunnington addition. We can see that these joists are still running. This is west going out the front of the house, if you recall through there and keep on going. And so we can see that the orientation holds. It wasn't this way like DHR said it was. Okay. Anybody have any questions? If we have a little bit of time, I don't even know. A little bit of time. And if we have a little bit of time left, I'm able to get the internet to work. I can bring up a couple of videos for you all. Do you have any questions?
Have they estimated at all, or even some kind of estimate of what it would cost to restore it?
Oh my goodness, what it would cost to restore it? Yes, depending.
First, what it would cost to stabilize.
We'll see restore it in the whole thing. We'll look at the whole package. Yeah, if we were to take the mansion as it is now and try to put it back exactly as it was, say in the pictures of the gold side, we're looking at $3 million minimum. Minimum. Now that is to do restoration, preservation work. Restoration and preservation. So one of the things, Richard's going to smack me for this. So one of the things that is actually really important to the foundation when we're looking at proving the theory of where is the oldest part of the house is if we were to get a hold of the house, right? some of it is in very bad condition, and at some point in time, you have to look at it realistically and say, we want to save all of the history. But at some point in time, spending that amount of money on the damage that's there just isn't going to happen. So the new theory is actually very hopeful for us, because if we're only able to, and this is all, if our dreams come true, we can only save part of it, we would still be saving the oldest portion of the house that was on this property. It would be the additions that are the most badly damaged portions that might have to be sacrificed for it. And for me, from a historical preservation standpoint, that's huge if we can prove that. That's huge.
Now, you mentioned that this 1830s, the earliest brick house there, that's from the Watkins.
Yes, Wood, James C. Wood.
Woods. Now, have you found any evidence of the Woodson occupation of the property?
No, the Woodson occupation supposedly would have been a non-brick structure.
Right, yeah, but
Yes.
it would be fairly easy to tell because it's a significant difference in the ceramics used during the Woodson occupation and the ceramics used during the Wood occupation. And if you found trash or whatever, why would they put the house in another location from the Woodson house? I mean, they may have just built it right beside it.
Right.
And you can tell that easy enough with just the ceramic collection from around the house.
That would be fascinating. I think so.
If the Woodson occupation was there,
We should be able to prove it. What might be interesting is that might prove, we know, actually, Nelson can probably tell us, we know where the original wooden structure stood that was supposedly the Woodson house before it was torn down. But there's a theory that India had that house moved from another place. What they're saying is that we could look around that area and know whether it was actually built in that area or it had been unfortunately
you know there was
moved.
an occupation.
You know, there's an occupation. That would be a wonderful addition to the history of this property. It would clear up the question of getting the others that are really not going to.
If the houses were go up auction with the negotiations,
I have not heard the auction. Has anybody else heard about it maybe going up for auction? I don't know. I haven't heard.
Facebook yesterday and maybe it was with the Farmville Herald.
Okay, maybe. I do know that there's a lot of Facebook posts out there from the October 2020 auction that happened and nobody bought it, so I'm not sure if there's a new one that's going to happen. The last that I talked to the investors, it was listed under somebody's website, but maybe. We'll have to look at that.
I saw the auction on October 7th.
Okay, that might have been
October 7th.
20, that might have been the 2020. Okay, yes ma'am.
Was there a minimum price that they were hoping for? Like, why wouldn't it sell in 2020? I'm surprised.
That I don't know, it was still bid auction. I'm assuming that there was probably a reserve on that and that it wasn't met. That was my assumption.
Will you explain to them that it's not only just the house, but other properties too?
Oh, as far as what's up for sale now?
Yeah.
Yes, I guess to reiterate, Jimmy wanted me to reiterate what's up for sale now is 300 plus acres that includes the mansion, plus an additional 400 acres owned by 2 other investment groups on golf course property. Not the golf course itself. The golf course is not part of the $12.5 million deal. It is owned by a separate entity.
And they won't separate them.
And they won't separate them, no. We were told no.
So you get how many acres with the house?
600. 600 acres go with it right now. Let me see if we can get one thing to work. I would really like you all to see. So if we go back to controlling the future if we don't own it? Yeah, that's a great question. We wish we did own it. We had a shot at it last summer before they decided to change how they were selling it. So the best shot that we had, because it's hard, right? We don't own it, so we don't want to put a whole lot of money into it because it's owned by investors. So our money is going into, and what we're trying to do is to get to the documentary link to show you a trailer from the gentleman who's doing it from us from another one that he did, just to give you all an idea of the value. The best chance that we have is to use the documentary as a marketing tool to go after preservation-minded investors that might exist in this country and say, look, this is for sale. Because honestly, if you ask my honest opinion, I mean, investors are going to come in and they're going to look at this house. If you're talking about Horton Homes out of Texas or one of these big developers, they're going to come in and look at this and they're going to be like, no, it's much better just to build a new one. It's too much money to save this old one. Why would we want to do that? We want to find somebody who is preservation-minded enough that they would want to join with a nonprofit, because a nonprofit can bring a lot to the table. You develop your houses and your land, and you let us take this giant eyesore liability off your hands, and then work to raise the money to get it back to a good condition. Otherwise, it's going to be bought by investors that are they're going to bulldoze it and put it. They're going to put something new in. Does that answer your question about how we can control it versus not? We're not in control at all.
Anybody else?
Now,
I probably could in just a second. I was going to see when you get this lovely signature. I think it's trying to load. I think it's just So this is a trailer from the producer.
Turning this beacon into a den of action.
what is it that makes your city worth living in? It's your city's history, it's the soul, it's the culture.
My name is Michael Schwartz. My friends and I love exploring and documenting abandoned buildings to tell their stories. And the Majestic Hotel in Hot Springs, Arkansas was something that fascinated us from the moment we walked in.
Majestic was one of the great hotels in the South. It was this huge, sprawling complex full of restaurants, drugstores, a bathhouse.
When this place captured my soul, I wanted to help somehow. And that's when I met Brenda.
Maybe there's a way I can form a movement to actually restore that hotel and save it.
Restore Majestic Hotel is in seriously bad shape.
Should have been allowed to get that way. That's called demolition by neglect. The yellow brick was in horrid condition. If the yellow was pretty compromised, your city saying that building to death.
Let's burn it to the ground.
Turning this beacon into a den of ash.
The red brick was spared from its fire. After the fire, people from all across the state wanted to make sure Hot Springs history would be protected.
When you have this building that needs a champion.
It's pretty obvious the fire did not start internal to the building. That seems really strange.
The city's plan is to wipe this out.
It's hurting our businesses on Park Avenue. Timer's running out for us to find a developer for the building unaffected by the fire. You show the city why historic preservation is important.
I will not prohibit them from having a voice.
Some of us want to watch NCIS.
I'm consumed by the history that is in this city and the things that we have to preserve.
Could the Majestic Hotel be saved?
So the gentleman that made that movie, that was a trailer for it, is the one that we hired to make our documentary. That one is available on Amazon, now that you guys are going to go watch it. So I will give a spoiler, they did not save the Majestic Hotel. The city decided to bulldoze it.
when you get your documentary, you might come back here and share it with us
If you all would like to see it, I'd be happy to bring it.
next year sometime.
Any other questions? While I show the cookies?
Anybody else?
Tell them what you have to display.
We do have a dual prize tonight. Heather has provided it. An actual, real, live Dunnington Mansion Foundation coffee mug. Just what you need.
How many have
So let's see. Everybody have a ticket? Who doesn't have a ticket? Everybody's good?
two, Bob? Two of them.
Two winners. We got two of them. All right. Roll that other thing. Okay, just about two. Two, that's that many, a 9, and a 2, that many again. 2 9s.
She said, I can't take that. I said, I'll take your ticket.
How we doing? What do you got? One more. This one starts with that many, 3, 0, and 7. Lucky 7. 307. All right, now you ready for some cookies?
She's got.
Richard made us some lovely cards here. It goes straight to the donation site, right, on the site. There's also business cards here. In the back where the cookies and refreshments are set up, there's a poster board with some before and after pictures, so you guys can get a real up-close look at those, as opposed to on the computer screen here. And Richard has brought us a model that he put together of what we think the original house might have looked like. So there's all kinds of stuff sitting around here, and last two, hang on, Jimmy wants to get the last two slides.
How often do you have the tours?
The tours are set on John's schedule, so the next one is going to be in the beginning, probably the first 2 weeks of December. And then we'll probably have ones again in the late winter, early spring. We stop for the summertime just because it's not fun for anybody. It takes bees, vultures, poisons, and all the things. Which slide do you want me to do, Jimmy?
Last two.
This one.
Yeah, full size.
All right. That was fantastic. All right. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
All right.